Hello and welcome back to this week's Bible study in the Old Testament book of Ezra and the lesson called The Exiles Return Home. Now, Ezra began his book by telling of God's fulfilled promise that Jeremiah had previously prophesied about, that God's people would indeed one day return to Jerusalem. Well, during the reign of King Cyrus of Persia, the people were allowed to return home. Cyrus decreed that he had been appointed by God to build a temple in Jerusalem for the worship of God. Even though Cyrus didn't have real allegiance to Israel's true God, Yahweh, God indeed had appointed him to build a temple for God in Jerusalem. And because the captivity in Babylon was over, the people had the choice whether they wanted to return back to Jerusalem or not, or stay in Babylon. And some of them did stay. We just learned about Esther and Mordecai. But those who wanted to return were welcome to do so. But those who chose to stay were ordered to give offerings to help the Jerusalem temple be rebuilt. Led by Zerubbabel, some 42,000 Israelites, majority of whom were from the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, chose to leave Babylon and return home to Jerusalem. Along with the exiles, Cyrus also returned the items that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem when he destroyed it, and it was to be placed in the new temple once it was rebuilt. A few months after arriving in Jerusalem, the priests began worshiping on the temple foundation that had been restored. The priests also led the people to celebrate the Festival of Booths, which was a festival that celebrated the deliverance from Egypt, the God's deliverance of the people from Egyptian slavery. And so this was a reminder that God keeps his promises. In Ezra chapter 3, verses 1 through 4, we read, "Now when the 7th month came, and the sons of Israel were in the cities, the people gathered together as one man to Jerusalem. Then Jeshua the son of Jozadak and his brothers the priests, and Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel and his brothers arose and built the altar of the God of Israel to offer burnt offerings on it, as it is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. So they set up the altar on its foundation, for they were terrified because of the peoples of the lands. And they offered burnt offerings on it to the Lord, burnt offerings morning and evening. They celebrated the Feast of Booths, as it is written, and offered the fixed number of burnt offerings daily, according to the ordinance, as each day required." The Feast of Tabernacles is like many of the feasts that were instituted by God. It was a way of reminding the Israelites that they were delivered from slavery from Egypt by God. And so it begins and ends with a special day of rest. And during those days, the native Israelites were to dwell in booths or in tents or tabernacles, whatever you want to call it. And so it was to remind them that God had delivered them out of the land of Egypt. And they were also to be looking forward to the coming Messiah, Jesus Christ, who would deliver his, God's people from the bondage of sin. And so God keeps his promises, and that's what this is all about. It's a reminder of God keeping his promises. Well, the exiles have returned home. Why? Because God promised they would, and God always keeps his promises. Well, next time in the book of Ezra, we'll continue by looking at the rebuilding of the temple. I'll see you soon, and God bless you.